We will look now at the time map of life expectancy on average levels in each country from 1961 till 2020. This is based on the data reported by the World Bank for all those years, and as I said, on a national average. You may see here that the life expectancy was in 1963 below 50 years in the whole of Africa, with the exception of Zimbabwe and Botswana, Egypt and Morocco, where those life expectancy were just above 50 years of age. Also, it was below 50 in Bolivia and in much of Central America, from Nicaragua, Honduras and Guatemala. Haiti also had a very low life expectancy, just above 50 years, and it was also below 50 years from Turkey all the way to China, including the Middle East, Iran, the Stan Republics, India, and South Asia, with the exception of Thailand, that had a life expectancy at that time of 56. It was a bit higher in regions like Peru and, as I said earlier, Morocco, Egypt, Botswana, Zimbabwe, Syria, Iraq, Mongolia. And it was higher in the rest of South America, up to 60 years of age in some countries, from 55 to 60, and it was in Kazakhstan and the northern Stan republics. It was higher than 65 in the northern countries, together with the southern Argentina, Chile, and Australia, New Zealand. But in the northern stretch from Japan to Alaska, it was higher than 65. And in some countries it was much higher. Highest, in fact, was in Sweden, and with a life expectancy of 73. How did it evolve in the following decades and years? And by the late 60s, life expectancy improved, and some regions in Africa that had life expectancy before below 50 went into the 50 to 55-year-old bracket, including as well China and Turkey and the Middle East and Central America. In the 70s, those regions increased their life expectancy above 55 and 60 in the case of China. And while the countries in the northern regions and also southern South American cone, Australia, New Zealand, increased their life expectancy as well. And we see Sweden still with the highest life expectancy in the 70s with 75. In the 70s, life expectancy continued to improve, with already some countries showing life expectancy above 75: Iceland, Norway, Sweden, Switzerland, the Netherlands, and Japan. In fact, Canada overtook Sweden as the highest life expectancy, but Japan was higher than all of them already by the late 70s. This is how it continued to evolve, with China being already green with life expectancy close to 70, much of Europe over 75, and Canada and Australia, with the southern cone in South America higher than 70, and higher than 65, Mexico, and most of the Andean countries except Bolivia. We only had the sub-Saharan African countries between Mali and Angola, with and slightly southern Mozambique, Madagascar, with life expectancies below 50. Sierra Leone and South Sudan had the lowest life expectancy levels at that time. We also see red spots here in Cambodia, Nepal, and Afghanistan. As we got closer in the 80s and the 90s to the end of the century, we see that the whole of North America and the whole of Europe, Western Europe, is now in dark green with life expectancies above 75, as well as Canada, New Zealand, and Japan, and Chile here. And by the way, Costa Rica as well. With life expectancies between 70 and 75 in much of the rest of the South American continent, with the exception of Bolivia and Haiti. Some areas in Africa increase slightly the life expectancy, but always below 55 in the sub-Saharan region. And India improves slightly, but stays at around 60 years, while China is already 71 years of life expectancy. What happens after the turn of the century? We see that still the dark green areas of life expectancy are, as mentioned above, together with Uruguay and South Korea. It expands also to Oman and the Arab Emirates. At that time, Colombia also, and both Argentina and Chile have high life expectancies above 75. And at that time also Sri Lanka, our reference country, has a life expectancy above 75. In the last decade, we see that those countries with such high life expectancy include China, include Saudi Arabia, Iran, Turkey, Morocco, Algeria, most of South America, Cuba, and here countries like Malaysia, of course Australia and New Zealand. And the countries in sub-Saharan Africa have evolved to a better life expectancy, but still most of them below 60 or 65 years old, with countries with very low life expectancy like Eritrea, which holds the lowest life expectancy, while the largest life expectancy stays with Japan. We will see now the longest life expectancy and shortest life expectancy, Central African Republic and Eritrea. Now, let us see some of the most populated countries and how they have been evolving in time. We see here Japan, China, the Russia Federation. Let's look at India as well. Let's look at the United States. Let's look at Spain, a country with very high life expectancy. And let's look at South Africa as well. We see that South Africa dropped its life expectancy in a very abrupt way in the 90s due to AIDS. We see also that the Russian Federation dropped its life expectancy here after the 90s and slowly was catching up. If we take away all these countries to see a better comparison between India and China, we see how life expectancy in China increased in a very fast way already in the 60s and in the 70s, and it has remained with slow growth ever since. So the large increase of life expectancy in China took place in the 60s and the 70s, before the exponential growth of the GDP. And that was the diverging time with India, which continued with a slow growth throughout the period. So you can check on our tutorial on how to use the database and see any of the countries. Let's look here at Sri Lanka as well, and how Sri Lanka has been up here with very high levels of life expectancy throughout the period, and it is our reference country because of its ecological sustainability and its economical replicability being so healthy that it has had this life expectancy constant increase, with period in the 90s of stagnation due to the war, but catching up later and having very high levels now of above 76.5% years. That is over 4 years above the world average, with a GDP per capita half the world average, the best performing country. And let's also look at Costa Rica, which has an amazing high life expectancy with a more constant growth without the stagnation time here of the war in Sri Lanka, and a life expectancy of 79.9. That's 80 years. That is 8 years above the world average, with a very similar GDP per capita as the world's average. So continue comparing and check on how life expectancy, how human life has been evolving over the last 60 years in our humanity, and how it gives a hint of the inequities.